Exceptional Randos Show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Wow, that was random. Exceptional Radio.
Hey, good afternoon. It is the 24th of October, and it is a cloudy 64 degrees here in Bloomington. It's actually quite nice if you don't mind overcast. So this is actually about as random as I can get. Today, I learned of a Georgia man who used $57,000 of COVID relief loan money to buy Pokemon cards.
Huh. Was he a card shop owner beforehand or something?
I mean, this is like an absurd. Well, he lied about the number of employees he had and the revenue his business generated when he filed for the economic disaster loan. So, yeah. He's facing 20 years and $250,000 in fines.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's the price.
But he thought he was a genius when he was doing it too.
I mean, he's trying to catch them all. I mean, you gotta. $50,000. It is. He's just trying to get like some rare Pokemons, right? That's admirable, sort of, except for trying to defraud the government. Yeah. This is the kind of stuff that I was actually expecting to read about last year during the initial wave of relief fund allocation. But it just took a while, I guess.
Well, they were going after the black people first.
Well, yeah. Well, this guy's...
Let's keep it real. They're like, okay, let's find all the black people that did this. And once they did that, now they're like, okay,
well, this
let's find everybody else.
He's Irish. So they went from black people onto the Irish, it looks like.
Yeah.
Who's next? The Dutch? So
I mean,
oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say I don't know who else was able to come here and get loans before other American citizens, but it's like, yeah, like Elon Musk is able to come here and get billions of dollars in subsidies before regular American citizens can get loans from the government.
But wasn't his fortune amassed through mastery of apartheid?
No, that's his parents' fortune.
Oh, okay. I mean, isn't that kind of the same thing, though?
No. His fortune is like a lot more exploitative on a much grander scale than his parents.
Yeah.
Which is like he was able to exploit at a larger scale.
That's just like that's still apartheid, though. I mean, he's still
right.
His companies are still leveraging child labor, so
yeah.
I mean, they can eat dicks all day long. Actually, I read a recent study that reports that the biggest problem with the electric car industry is going to be the batteries, because they can't actually recycle or reclaim as much of the materials they claim they did. In fact, their sustainable plan to process involves storing the battery material in plastic tubs in the desert until they figure it out. Like, I think that's the whole, like, what is it? When you just go ahead and do something and ask for forgiveness later type situation. I think that's what they're trying to get away with at this point.
I mean, I don't even know if it's that so much as they just lie and see what people believe and how much money they can get to keep furthering the lie. And it's like the way that, okay, the same shit with the Hyperloop, how it was promised to be, they're going to be 500 or 300 miles an hour or whatever the fuck it was that they were claiming, and now it's down to 30 miles an hour, and it's just Teslas in a tunnel.
Wait, the Virgin Hyperloop was shuttered?
Not the Virgin one, the Tesla one.
Oh.
But what I'm saying is they built a test track in Vegas, or a test tunnel, not a test track. It's like 3 miles long. And then the local government gave them a contract to build it even further. And it's just basically Teslas in a tunnel. So it's like, it's people who don't know what the fuck they're doing, giving money to people who are saying they know what they're doing, but they actually don't know what they're doing. And it's just a grift. And this is where, like, the Elon Musk grift is as follows. Let's say he gets $100 million subsidy. Let's just say that, put a number on $100 million.
A round number, 100 million. That's
just
easy.
A round number. What he'll do is he'll take $10 million from that and he'll create a prize and say, SpaceX now has this prize. We're going to solve this problem. We're going to give you $10 million if you can solve this cargo loading problem and figure out how to get us to fucking space on $10 million. And it's like, then there's like some college students that are really needing to build their name, or some postdocs that are really needed to like make it, that come in and fucking win this prize, and they build their name. SpaceX gives them $10 million. The news gets published. SpaceX gives out award. When in reality, the money came from the fucking government, and SpaceX just took $100 million, pocketed 90, and then paid some fucking student to solve the problem. That's what they do every fucking time. Just go look. I'm not making this up.
But isn't that
this is what they do?
That's more than
I'm
just.
not talking to you.
No, I know, but that's more than just SpaceX or Tesla or Elon Musk Corp. It's systemic. It's industry wide.
Yep.
It's beyond industry. It's multiple industries that do this.
Yep.
They will all provide some reward for intellect and creativity and talent to students who aren't employees. So they don't. There's no burden of. There's no tax burden on them. There's no obligation to provide any kind of benefit for their time, effort, research, whatever. This is a huge problem. And then of course America wants to pretend that it's protecting intellectual property rights, when it's really just the intellectual property rights of huge scale multinational corporations.
And in the process, they'll have propaganda out there saying, you shouldn't own any of that. The government shouldn't own that. This should be in the hands of a small company, even though the fucking government gave them the subsidy to buy that or to pay for that prize. So it's like the way that this cycle is then reinforced, so people will try to eventually become the Elon and want to be that individual who's controlling intellectual property over an entire industry, so then they can make it appear like, oh, he open sourced his fucking plans for an electric car. Well, the barrier to entry to creating a car factory is really fucking high. So just putting those open source plans out there is just a PR stunt. That doesn't fucking help anybody. Doesn't start any new car companies, because you need like a factory, you need workers, you need insurance. There's all these things you need to actually build a fucking electric car. So when he put out those fucking open source plans, it was 100% to start creating this myth around him that he's like this pro free market guy who's really about cooperation and when he can, but in reality it's just he's a grifter, and he's like using public speculation to boost. I mean, he's not the only one that does it, obviously, but in the same way that they use the media to create this myth around them, so you believe, oh, Elon really has people believing he can get us to fucking Mars. A problem that fucking an entire organization, not just a team, an entire organization of scientists in fucking NASA has not been able to solve. He's got people out here thinking Elon can just fucking solve that problem by himself, as if he doesn't work, like as if Tesla and SpaceX aren't a bunch of scientists anyways. He his narrative makes it seem as if he goes into this room every week and like does a bunch of equations on a fucking whiteboard and then goes and gives orders to every single department in both of those organizations. And people just move to his every single whim as if everything is Elon's.
I mean,
or like that's the way it comes off.
I mean, we know he's humble because he still uses a whiteboard. No, seriously, like Tesla has the brain power of NASA or ESA or the CNSA. Like I'm not buying it. I don't think that any private entity can match the might of a government agency in terms of the ability to attract real talent. I think that they can attract a certain type of talent, but not the people who are gonna. China landed on Mars, their first attempt to get to Mars. That's like that's the problem. That's their power.
Like here's the problem. Government agencies in America are limited in their capacity to pay. So when they give these subsidies to the private companies, the talent gravitates towards the private companies, but then you'll hear stories about people who work at somewhere like Raytheon, and then they just end up burning out and not being able to work in that industry ever again because of the horrible shit that they do. So it's like, you know, it's a weird pipeline of like, if you're in government and you're doing something of use, eventually the private sector is going to scoop you up and eventually you're going to get burnt out unless you're just a horrible human being and you love exploitation. And those are the real ends. It's like, there are people who are able to get around those ends and do some positive shit, but the problem is ultimately that the money is always coming from an imperialist machine who has an agenda. So if they're giving you money and you think you're working against them, like Elon's trying to make it seem as if he's some rebel. I mean, they're fucking funding him, so he's not working against them.
Yeah.
He's sending government payloads to space. They need him, and he needs them in certain ways. And part of it is like the reason they need him is because then they can use private sector shit to get around restrictions that the government has. So there are things happening. So they use private sector to like go faster, knowing that government regulations make things go slow on purpose. And this is the problem of like, obviously there's a need for regulation, but then when you have people who don't know what they're doing regulating, it slows things to a halt. And in the process, they just turn to private sector when they need to actually get things done.
Yeah.
And then the private sector skirts rules, and it's this vicious cycle of like,
you know, the scary part about that is, and I get it, people want the money, and you know, we've talked, you know, countless times about how, you know, when money is a driving factor, it's no longer about whatever it was that they started doing. I think that the part of the problem is that no private entity can match a government or a state in terms of long-term projects. They don't pan out. They always meet weird issues. There's some setback. They've got to reschedule. They've got to extend the project. And a lot of that is there's some person sitting behind a desk at a very high level in the food chain who's making really minor changes that have to be accommodated. But with government, I mean, they move at a glacial pace for a reason. And it's so that those kind of changes have to go through a review board and committee and all that kind of fun stuff. But at the same time, by building in that kind of deliberate deliberation, they are able to, you know, see projects through to the end. We wouldn't have our national infrastructure the way that we have it if we were relying completely on private industry. There'd be a few toll roads and a bunch of, well, naturally formed dirt paths that only a few people ever ventured on. We'd be stuck in like, the 1800s. I just don't think that the personality that gravitates towards the high dollar private contract is the same person as that goes to NASA or ESA and dedicates their life, even though they may not get paid as well. They're also not, like you elucidated, there's no Raytheon factor where they burn out, and not just burn out, but completely leave the entire industry that they built their career around, their entirety of their education. Like you said, postdoctoral candidates and people who are doing their postdoctoral work, they're in it for the long haul. And so I think that's a really strange or scary type of gambling.
Well, and I think part of the problem is NASA has been defunded steadily over like the past, even I guess like the past 20 years. There's been times when it's gone up slightly.
Yeah.
But they've been steadily reducing NASA's budget, which is why we've ended up having to hitch rides with SpaceX and hitch rides with the Russians to the International Space Station. And so it's like, it would be different if NASA was getting properly funded, but in an anti-intellectual, militarized state, that then when NASA's getting funding, it's for military related projects anyway. It's not the same. Again, NASA is a organization that was born of like a Nazi program. So it's like, it's really, what's the word? It's optimistic to look at the discoveries that NASA has made and all of the scientific additions that they have contributed. But on the other hand, it's like, yeah, a lot of that stuff is used to put weapons in space, and fucking a significant portion of that is used to subjugate people in one way or another, whether it's through satellite monitoring or fucking.
Oh, I think there's a long, deep relationship between the military supporting research, any kind of research, whether it be, payload management, and that could be something like delivering inventory from one warehouse to another, or it could also be some kind of ordnance as payload. And how do we get it from point A to point B? It's very clear that a lot of the interest in space is driven by the desire to, I don't think it's a desire to scare people. I think it's genuinely to advance the technology, and the military gets to benefit from that.
I think it would be good if we could look at NASA in good faith and think they were only about science, but we just can't.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And that's why it's like,
well, they were founded by Nazis.
Yeah, and it's like that is the history of the organization, and the history of science in this country alone makes it impossible to have 100% good. You don't have 100% good faith in any time, but
yeah,
it makes it like, is it 50% good faith or like 49% good faith? Because that's where I'm saying, like, I don't even know if it's mostly good faith, and I don't. It's hard to know,
They
because
can't even perform a 51%
attack.
attack on themselves.
It's like their budgets are transparent, and what they're doing at a publication level is transparent, but there's no way to actually know what the government's goals for them are. And when they'll put out these like 20-year, 50-year agendas, and then people will misrepresent those as like, oh, this is what the Illuminati's planning. But it's like, I think we discussed how China will have like 100-year plans or 150-year plans. And I think this is where our government is too polarized to be able to make plans beyond like 2 to 4 years, but little segments can make longer plans. And that's where, even looking at NASA though, they've been defunded to the point where like there's more likelihood. I don't think either one's going to make it to Mars, but the private sector has a better likelihood of making it, but neither one's going to make it because the capital's too dispersed.
I think if China wanted to make it to Mars, like send people there, they could. I think they would actually.
I think they'd die. I don't think they'd be able to get people back.
Well,
That's
I don't think. I don't think anyone's coming back from Mars if they actually go to Mars. I think if people go to Mars, it's basically they're signing a waiver that says, "I know I'm going to get cancer, and I know I'm going to die, and I know I'm not going to receive any of the treatment necessary that I would on Earth." But that's the same risk with the moon.
Mm-hmm.
So. So we have a guest panelist today, Matt Toomey.
Hi guys.
Hey, how's it going, Matt?
Pretty good. I'm enjoying the podcast. I have a question for you guys, and I want to see if what your thoughts are, because we hear a lot from politicians that we use the private sector in order to save money for the government, but as you guys were alluding to, they're the ones benefiting from start getting all this new technology and coming up with it. And doesn't that ultimately mean, because we're going to want to have this technology eventually, we're actually going to probably spend more money in the end, like we do with the military industrial complex, eventually when we do want to do space exploration.
So,
I mean,
go
ahead.
What do you think space exploration means? I
don't think we know yet.
Okay.
I don't think we have any idea. I think, and that's what I think, Elon Musk is doing, and testing out, space rides, things like that. But we're going to want to eventually go to Mars, as you guys have been talking about, and other things, such as maybe improving technology for satellites and things of that nature. And if we're relying on the private sector, because we keep defunding NASA, when we actually want to have this technology, we're going to have to rely on the private sector to do that, which could possibly cost us more money in the end. I mean, what do you guys think about that? I mean, am I off base there, or do you guys think there might be some truth to that?
It's already costing us more money.
Yeah.
I don't think you're off base at all. And in the process, like, okay, how familiar are you with Voyager?
I mean, what I've read in the news.
I mean, and that's where, like, I'm not trying to be like reductive or I just like to get familiar with what people know about something before I talk about it, because the issue is when we're talking about space exploration right now, we're actually really talking about solar system exploration. And that's like, because of the vast distances that it takes to travel in space.
Oh, sure.
The time it took Voyager to exit the heliopause of our solar system was like 40 years. So it was like, it launched in the I forget exactly which year, but it launched in the 70s.
77.
77. And it was only in the recent aughts, or teens rather, that it finally made it to the heliopause. And then it was having trouble getting out of the heliopause because we had no idea what it would take or what it would be like getting out of the heliopause. So there's things about the distances involved with space travel alone where I'm like, realistically, it only makes sense for the first inhabitants or the first travelers to planets to almost always be robotic or some sort of like non-organic mobile being. And the closer we get to not sentient, but self-modifying sentient, or it's not sentient, self-modifying, code adjusting machines, the necessity for humans becomes less and less like necessary for scientific discovery, and it just becomes sort of a frivolous pursuit. And the more we look at space tourism and the way that asteroid mining was overhyped and it's not likely to actually be possible in the way that they were presenting. a lot of the a lot of the things associated with space travel will only, in my, based on what has happened so far, space tourism is not going to get far out of low Earth orbit if it ever does. And further, I'm not sure we have enough cooperation between the powers that be to get actual humans on Mars in any sort of useful capacity. So it's like we might waste like 30 or 40 years trying to get to Mars and then find out it was a complete waste of time because we have these private sector people selling us that narrative. So this is where, to me, that's the biggest problem, is like, if you take away the science fiction like stuff that has been posted or put in people's minds about space exploration, and then look at how space mining was framed by the people who were at the heads of the companies who were suggesting that it was even viable, now we know that it's not even really remotely viable as a concept. And all of those companies that were trying to sell that are basically fucking jokes. So with all that said, I don't think we have the technology to make space exploration really viable for anything except for like frivolous tourism for like the next like probably 150 years. And the problem becomes, we've romanticized it so much since the 60s and made it such a nationalist pursuit. This is, to me, like in the same way that the United States drained the wealth of the USSR with the Mujahideen, this is, to me, how Russia is getting back. Like, not the only way. There are multiple ways, but this is one of the ways that like Russia is getting back at us, which they always try to do, and then they make it look like they are being bigger on the world stage, which in some ways they are, but because it's like really crazy in that the smartest thing for Russians to do as a government is to buck the imperialist, oil dependent military complex on the world stage, but not actually disengage that strategy on the economic stage. And that's kind of what has been happening, because they'll like advance on the military front and then simultaneously condemn military industrial on the world stage. And the United States is not good enough to react to that in a way that diffuses it. So we keep getting pulled into like the red scare communist like nationalism that started in the fucking 30s and 40s, like even, I guess, even further back. But if you really want to go back to the early like 1910s, it's still the same shit. But the problem is there's too many old people that won't let it go. And the Russian government and propaganda machine plays into it and causes disruption in America. So it's like full circle, the private companies have too much influence over the trajectory of our government spending, because our government has now basically partitioned out advancement to private industry contracting, and then that gets funded based on public sentiment, which has been like fueled by disinformation and polarized political discourse. And in that, it's always self-defeating polar legislation that ends up undermining itself as to why we've been stagnating as a country, as to why we haven't been back to the moon, as to why private industry now can barely get us out of low Earth orbit, and why fucking listen, when Elon said he's trying to send his fucking Tesla to Mars, the shit went wildly off course because he can't get a fucking Tesla to Mars. He can't get a car to Mars. He's not getting people to Mars yet either. So when like he's trying to make it seem as if his team at SpaceX are somehow better than the team at NASA, it's bullshit. That's where this narrative is. It's a bunch of bullshit. Is like what it comes down to. I don't think we're not going to Mars anytime soon.
Okay, so
I don't agree with. I don't disagree with that, Chris. But real quickly before you jump in, I was just one quick question. Because I feel like I have a lot of
hold that thought 1 second. I want to put some perspective down real quick. So it costs about $28 million to launch for SpaceX to launch one of their rockets. The total cost of Perseverance is expected to be $2.7 billion. Voyager program, including the interstellar mission extension, is just under $900 million. The Artemis mission is expected to cost roughly $86 billion. Apollo mission, the Apollo program, adjusted for inflation, $280 billion. And the Mars SpaceX colony is expected to cost somewhere in the order of $10 trillion.
Whoa.
So we've learned more about our solar system, just the solar system, for less than $1 trillion. We've actually learned more about outer space with a program that costs less than $1 trillion, and it's a pair of robots. Okay, there's no way humans can bring the cost down and survive.
And they can't live in low Earth orbit for more than a year without horrible effects on their body.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing the astronauts
Just
with the
low Earth orbit.
Yeah. His bones started to turn into kind of a soft material. He lost his spine. It elongated in space, but once he got back down to Earth, he was shorter or something like that.
Yeah. Or he was. He had a twin. He looked different than his twin.
Yeah.
That was what happened.
Yeah. And they had to basically learn how to walk again because they couldn't stay standing for long periods of time because their muscles couldn't handle it. Like the things that happen to our bodies in low Earth orbit that they're finding out, I can't even imagine living. I mean, obviously this is like beyond our comprehension right now, but the things that also happen with isolation, they have to be mentally stable, and not like these are also the people that have to fix things that go wrong when there's like only 6 people on the ship. So if you're on Mars and there's 6 other people and your fucking oxygen supply starts leaking and you're the engineer and you have to get back to the dome and fix your oxygen supply with that suit on before, there's things that happen
before everyone else's air supply runs out, their emergency air supply runs out.
Under pressure without flipping out. There's and these types of things where they put it in movies where it's like, oh, under pressure. Like, no, people die when that shit happens. Like that's I'm just, space is such a hostile place.
Yeah.
We can barely survive on our own planet, and the way that it's being framed is just like, I'm not gonna say it's pure nonsense, but it's real close to pure nonsense. The way that, unless the only way it happens is if all of the governments of the planet who have any sort of vested interest in space work together. That's the only way we're getting a colony on
anywhere.
Anywhere. The moon, Mars, like anywhere. That's why the International Space Station works, is because it's a cooperative project. That's the only way shit works, really. Because ultimately, if it's not being cooperated on, one government will eventually assume that it's an act of war, and then they'll start making an attempt to diffuse it or deconstruct it or challenge it, and that's why it's like we can't have single nations colonizing planets without it then causing a war. We're just not that
We
good.
did it with that. We did it with Antarctica. We made a treaty not to colonize that. Just to use it. I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying we did it. You know, I mean, I don't. But really, who wants Antarctica? So
Right.
Antarctica may be home to the most incredibly rich deposits of minerals that we can't access. Just like Afghanistan and North Korea and Iran.
So again, I wanted to ask you guys another question, and you guys, I mean, because I think you guys have a lot of knowledge about this, because space exploration or space knowledge is just not one of my strong suits. That's why I'm fascinated to hear people who are smarter than I am. But let's just say theoretically, money wasn't an issue, and technology was there to get to space or get to Mars. Do you guys believe, because of what the studies that we've seen just being in the inner parts of space, that humans could actually survive a trip?
So I'm gonna hit this real hard. We've been going through a year and a half of global pandemic with series of lockdowns and travel restrictions and all that kind of stuff. And the collective consciousness of the internet has expressed that it can't handle that it goes batshit stir crazy. And when they do finally get to go out, they treat, industry people, service industry people like shit. They treat the only people out there who are willing to go and risk their lives during a global pandemic when the plague is in full effect. So they treat them horribly. So from that, I'm going to extrapolate. The vast majority of humans are incapable. They are not psychologically resilient enough to survive just the trip on the seed ship to the colony.
No, I don't disagree with that. I mean, when we went lockdown, everybody got crazy over Tiger King.
Yeah, exactly.
We didn't know what to do with ourselves.
So from there, we don't stand a very good chance cooped up in a ship. Mm-hmm. It would have to be so monumentally huge that there would be recreation spaces. And at that point, we're talking about a giant cruise ship. And that I still don't think that, even if everyone was highly trained, like, nobody gets on board because they have money or because they know somebody or someone's dad or mom is a high level official. The only people allowed are highly skilled. We actually we talked about Starfleet in the Federation one time, and under the context of not everyone even gets into Starfleet. It's like the best of the best of the best of the best, and they still make mistakes. And they have the most advanced technology we can imagine.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree with you. And I think we can look at it on, just traveling across the ocean. I mean, there are people who went stir crazy just trying to, because that was people thought a long trip was going from Europe to America.
Man, some asshole in Florida killed his girlfriend on a cross-country road trip. People can't even drive cross-country. Like, fuck. How the hell are they supposed to make it to the moon?
Yeah. This just makes me think of like a spatial Oregon Trail type thing, where like by the time you get there, everybody's different. You have a whole different crew when you get there.
So
it's just
we're amazingly social creatures, but we don't know it until we're isolated. Mm-hmm. And this is why solitary confinement is the worst punishment in jail, in fact.
Yeah.
Think about that. Think about that for a second. In prison, you can get punished even worse by just being put in a room by yourself.
Yeah.
And not being exposed. And apparently it just drives people so insane that it's like, they can't do it for too long because it's too cruel of a punishment. There's a limit on solitary confinement because it's too cruel of a. That to me, that shit always blew my mind when I was like, because I have a degree. One of my degrees is in psychology. So then people are not usually aware that there's like hive-minded mammals. Mm-hmm. There's naked mole rats, and they are actually a hive-minded mammal. So people always assume that mammals don't have hive minds, and that's not even remotely true. And I think what we've seen with the advent of the internet is that there is like a social psyche and a social consciousness. I don't know if it's chicken or egg, but you can tap into it and exit it. And some people just tap in and never disconnect, and then they try to like relate to normal people who aren't tapped in, and the shit just gets weird. Like I'll give an example. If somebody is constantly tapped in and they're trying to talk to someone in the real world, they'll relate everything you say to, I saw that on Facebook or I saw that on Twitter, and they can't not relate anything in the conversation to something back online. To me, that's like just a low level example of someone who's like too tapped in. And I'll call my dad out on shit like that, where I'm like, hey dad, do I know this person? Why are you talking about them to me? You're like, and I try to like pull him out of it to make sure he doesn't get too, like, as an older person, he's like, 67 or something. I don't want him to get pulled into this machine that he's not even aware is manipulating his emotions and manipulating his conversations to keep him tapped in to the point where he's on the phone with his son talking about some shit that he had, a conversation he had on Facebook. And I don't get pissed, but I'll like be like, hey, I don't know this person. We shouldn't be talking about this. And it happens less and less frequently. But this is where I'm saying, like, there is a digital hive mind that is emerging, whether people want to acknowledge it or not. And I think anything can be addictive, but the problem becomes when people don't realize, like, hey, I'm like getting a dopamine fix off of the hive mind's ups and downs. Then I think this is where people get wrapped up in the polarized hive. And there's not just one, there's multiple. So it's like, there's a left-wing hive mind, there's a right-wing hive mind, there's Black Twitter, there's Asian Twitter, there's, specific parts of Asian Twitter, there's Filipino Twitter, there's all this stuff where if you are aware of what's going on. And the only reason I'm even aware of it is because in one of my degrees, somebody was working on a master's that was like identifying digital tribes online. And this was back in like 2007. And I was like, that's an interesting concept of like digital tribes. But
lo and behold, it's real.
About it. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And it's so real that people will create their entire identities based around their digital tribes, but not even realize what they just did. So this is where I'm looking at it like there are a lot of layers of what is happening, and it's completely unpredictable. It could go in many different ways. This could all go positive at any given moment. But this is where, like, the way I see things happening, it's just it's a polarized hive mind that is not really aware that it's emerging. And I think that's why we're having a hard time moving it in any direction.
I think that one of the things that what I remember reading about when I was studying cybersecurity was just social engineering and manipulation of masses through information delivery systems. And it's not the kind of thing that's even really talked about in early computing classes. That's just not even a subject. You have to start at some point. You get trained to think in terms of like, well, how can I break this, or how can I subvert this tool so that I can figure out where the fail points are and secure it. But not everyone is able to make that conceptual leap from computer user to the person that's trying to fix it by breaking it. And I think that what we're dealing with is like a level of mass ignorance, because people don't even realize what's happening to them. And we're so used to everything in front of us making sense. And of course, everything on the computer makes sense because it's been engineered to make sense. But when methods of communication are so subversive that all people see is the news article and they fail to recognize the advertising baked into it, that's when I know that there's a huge gap in understanding. And that could be related to just being aware of popular culture, or being aware of the historical relevance of cultural events. I don't know, but I see this, and I've only had the most basic training in cybersecurity. Chris has extensive training in this. And so when I see something, I know that it's like, there's more to it, that I just need to dig deeper. But sometimes, I don't even know where to look, because at some point I reach a ceiling that's limited by, in many ways, my education and my exposure to a lot of these things. And so for somebody who has zero exposure to it, I have zero expectation that they would be able to recognize those things.
That makes sense. Again, I think, the irony of social media, and I think you guys have been, you guys touched on this, is that it's meant to bring us together. But really, again, we talked about this with companies wanting to make a profit, wanting to make money. It's about making money with advertisements. And the irony of social media is that it's actually isolating us more and more. So we're just focused on what we look at, and then we buy into the advertisements, we buy into the propaganda that's spewed to us. And it's and as Chris said, it could go right at any time. We all have the intelligence and capability to make it right, but maybe that's just not possible at the moment. What do you guys think?
I think the biggest impediment to it going right is, I've been really thinking about this a lot lately too. So it's not like this comment is not coming out of nowhere. When when like the very notion of social media, it turns friendships into a medium over which advertisements can be distributed. And obviously the problem with that becomes super obvious, but even worse, when a friendship and a social interaction is explicitly made into a medium, it becomes so transactional that it's impossible to then have an organic interaction anymore. It's all transactional. And this is where I've really been trying to figure out, what is happening when you take thoughts and establish them in asynchronous space and allow anybody to sort of go at those thoughts, but then you have a filter that's then algorithmically creating the most controversial exchanges possible with those thoughts. It's basically an antagonism accelerator. And the problem with that is, in a polarized environment, that's just making things worse faster. So that's what the end of social media becomes. But at the same time, it's like, well, maybe if we just accelerate to the worst part, maybe we just get it over and then we're back to the good part. Because it's like, we can't get to the good part without getting through the worst. And I do here, let me say it this way. When racist people started making themselves more public, mm-hmm. and they felt more comfortable putting it in the open, to me, I was like, okay, this gets us closer to actually solving this problem, because now they're not hidden, and then we don't have to have a discussion of whether they're there or not. And there are things about race, like the January 6th insurrection, for example, like that actually happening Well, now it's no longer hypothetical. Now we see how the government responds to white supremacist right wing attempt at taking over the Capitol building with like a slap on the wrist because there's too many white supremacists in the law enforcement agencies. And it's that shit's already proven. So it's like we now have moved past certain like there's certain like I said, there's certain things that
some people
basically
haven't moved
got
past
accelerated.
It.
Yeah. I mean,
some of those people are still
yeah,
stuck in post-Civil War era.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's also been illuminated in that we have this regressive thought in America that refuses to move forward no matter how many, you know, scientific advancements get made. And then in the process, it's like you have these people who will like be like, oh, I'm anti-vax, anti-mask. And then when they get sick, they'll fucking run to the hospital. So these people are fucking hypocritical, lying cowards that want to like beat on their chests. And then when they get fucking sick, they run and cry. That's where I'm like, the things that are happening, it's like the antagonism accelerator is making it worse. But I'm not sure that this was ever unavoidable. So I'm just like, I don't know if you've seen Dune, but I'm just like shutting down the thopter and riding with the wind, basically.
Yes, yes.
Is what it feels like right now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah. January 6th, that was a good point with the January 6th. Which again was also fueled by social media. You know, it was like about because as we were talking, I think you and I were talking yesterday. It's that we follow the narratives that we want to follow, or we want to validate our own opinion.
Yeah, the confirmation bias when there's no initial self-bias analysis being performed, that's I was really last night when we were talking, I was really speaking more about ineffective research practices. but it's the same thing. I think it wasn't effective
because they literally thought they were going to go and stop, or they believed that Vice President Pence at the time had the power to stop the election.
Well, they were going for him. They were all sorts of messaging about how like they were looking for Pence too. So one of the things that occurred to me when Chris was talking about the antagonization accelerator of social media. It's the fact that it's a forum. We've had forums for the better part of 40 plus years now on some form of internet. And so these kinds of interactions have always been around, but now we have a face that we can put to it. And these comments we're getting notifications about them. At least most people who are really deeply involved, they get notifications. Mm-hmm. And they have constant reminders of what someone said. You know, these aren't just like thoughts that pass in one ear and out the other after they get over it. People go back and check their conversations over and over again, and conversations get heated. And then, you know, I think that's where we end up losing the nuances, that people are constantly reminded of some idea that somebody else had. And for whatever reason, and I haven't figured this part out, why some random person on the internet's opinion matters to them.
Because people don't like being people who are going on the internet to get their own, again, what we talk about is validating their own opinion. When someone goes against your opinion, it may question your intelligence, and some people don't like that. And there are some people who, and I believe intelligent people actually want people to question their thoughts so they can learn. But a lot of people, they get online, I think, to just regurgitate what they believe. And also what you said is that they hang out with like-minded people. And when someone questions their point of view, they have to go on there to show that they know what they're talking about, even when they don't. I mean, is that, you guys think that's wrong? I mean, from what I see when I argue with people online, which I don't do anymore. I used to, most people when I was drunk, but like some days I was just like, let's just burn the whole place down like Joker and The Dark Knight. But I really refrain from it now because I don't feel I need that validation. But there are times where people do, and I think that's a big reason why people talk online. And I think partly also what you said is because it's a history that stays there forever. They can go back and say, hey, I was right here, or this made sense to me, or I got him there. And I think that comes from a source of pride. I mean, what are your thoughts?
I don't think that's off at all.
No, I think it's accurate.
Even further, like you're saying, because it stays there, they can continue to go get that dopamine hit. Like days later, man, I own that guy in that conversation. Dumbass. What was he thinking, man? And it's like, it's there for them to just keep going back to, and eventually they need to have another argument to win so they can I think, not to say it's directly tied to depression, but I think when people don't have dynamic lifestyles and then they get an adrenaline dump from getting into an intense conversation, they get addicted to it and they don't even realize it. So this is where it's like, if you're at baseline and then suddenly somebody makes some comment about, or you see a comment in your feed, because the comment, who knows when they made it, but for whatever reason, the algorithm puts this comment in your feed that is the exact opposite of the things that you believe. For some reason, it appears there. You feel the need to comment on it. And then when you comment, not you, I hate English. When the person comments on it, it makes them feel like a cathartic release that then also in the adrenaline dump of responding and the slight dopamine hit, they're going to keep going back to that because there's no other stimuli in their environment besides those sort of like antagonistic adrenaline bumps. And I think that's where, when people are like, you need to get out more. Well, yeah, but those people then also are antagonistic in real life too. So then they go out and fucking get road rage, and then they're like rude and bump into people at the fucking grocery store. So these people are just actually douchebags. And I think what ends up happening is there are a few douchebags, not a few, there's a lot of douchebags on the internet who are really loud, who don't have anything else to do, who are at work with nobody looking over their shoulder, who feel entitled to then antagonize others online. And because they're getting paid for it effectively, they keep doing this shit. And there's like just a whole pocket of America that is basically getting paid to troll because their bosses are inept and incompetent. And this is like, I'm calling 25% of the American economy is spent on Facebook trolling people. Just pick an organization. It don't matter. 25% of the people in the organization are in Facebook having a fucking argument with somebody else on Facebook. It doesn't even matter. You could be at a doctor's office. One of the fucking people at the administrative desk out of 4 is on Facebook arguing with somebody when they should be fucking working.
Okay,
that's
so
America.
I agree with you 100%.
According to the Facebook outage, Facebook down detector, on the 5th or on the 4th when they went down.
Oh my God, I remember that day.
There was a 35% spike in developer activity. 35.
So I was even being conservative.
Yeah. 35%.
I was being conservative.
There was a 35% increase in throughput and activity.
Wow. That is crazy.
So I was being conservative, apparently. That's there we go.
And the thing is, you guys are right. I mean, I remember I went out for a run. I got some fresh air finally, so but here's the thing. I want to see if we can bring this back full circle for a second, because like I think there are douchebags as you alluded to, Chris, and I agree. But I also think like people are so much more emboldened on Facebook to say what they're within their minds instead of having a real conversation with somebody, because of the way that Facebook has conditioned the way that we communicate with people. And I've noticed I have a friend, I'm not going to mention a name, but I have a friend who will argue with me all day long on Facebook. And when we used to argue, and always had to have the last comment. That was just something he had to do. He had to have the last comment. But when he and I talked in person, it was a lot more cordial, and he would see my view a little bit more, and I would see his view, and we could come to some sort of a not necessarily an agreement, but just a, hey, let's just agree to disagree, but we understand where we're coming from. And I think it's partially conditioned on the fact that how we now communicate with people. What do you guys feel about that?
I don't disagree, but I'll use my father as an example, because I think it's easy to use him because I think he represents a lot of people his age. My dad is basically the same online and off. He's very he likes debate. He likes heated debate, and he does not shy away from one ever. So if you get into a debate with my dad in real life or online, that shit is going to the end of the debate, and you are going to agree to disagree if you don't agree. And I started refusing to disagree or to agree to disagree. I think that becomes like effectively a cop out of being able to see the conversation to the actual end and creating an artificial end. And that's where I started refusing to agree to disagree with him. And the issue is, it's like, because he's my father, he can't like not ever be my father. So when we do that, there's no end to the relationship. And this is where he's like the only person I'll ever do that with. If I know like he's not going to stop being my father. So in that, if I really just don't care about the person and they're like, we need to agree to disagree, I'm like, I'm never talking to you ever again. Like, we don't, this relationship ends here. Like, because the problem is those things are usually about someone else's rights. And I don't agree to disagree about people's rights. And that's the type of shit where I'll draw the line. I'm like, no, we're not agreeing to disagree. I'm just not ever talking to you again. So it's like shit like that, where with my dad, it's almost no different. So there are some people who I do understand get like keyboard courage. But those people probably get liquid courage too. You know what I mean? So I think that's where the shit that's on their mind, they'll get like emboldened to say it when they're like, either drunk or behind. They know you can't hit them in the face, Yeah. So that's where it's like he'll agree to disagree until he gets drunk. I bet that dude will start letting that shit out. I mean, not to say it's 100, but what I'm getting at is, when people let shit out, it was there, and it's not
to come
like
from somewhere.
Yeah, it's not like going on Facebook makes somebody homophobic or racist or some shit like that. Like, I went on Facebook and it made me hate gay people. I don't know what happened. Like, that's not how that shit works.
Well, a lot of time people, they like they couch their ideas or shelter their beliefs in an opinion. And it enables them to just say whatever they think because it's their opinion, because they believe it.
And then they'll backpedal and be like, "Oh, I was just trolling."
Yeah,
I was just trolling, man.
First off, I love the word keyboard courage.
Yeah.
The phrase, that is amazing. Also, just bring it back full circle. I love how you block people in real life. That's really awesome.
Oh yeah. I've been blocking people, man. That block. Woo! I use that block quick. Because those people, dude, I had to block somebody on a phone call because this dude was like, we wouldn't stop talking about NFTs. And I'm like, I'm into, blockchain and smart contracts and cryptocurrency and all this shit. But there's like even a point where I don't want to talk about this shit anymore. And dude just he wouldn't stop. And I was like, hey, I don't want to talk about this. And it's like, you are not respecting my desire not to talk about this, so I'm going to talk to you later. And I fucking hung up on him. And I was like, dude, that was weird. I have never been in a spot like until that day where I had to like cut off a conversation with somebody who I thought was my friend because I at first I was like, hey man, I don't want to talk about NFTs anymore. I was like totally calm about it because that's what I was like. It was like a Sunday or something, and we had already been talking for like 30 minutes or 40 minutes, and he started going on about how NFTs were gonna like revolutionize shit. I don't want to talk about. I'm cool. Like, can we talk about something else? And he's like, but NFTs, man, and he like went back to it, and I'm like, hey, I just asked you not to talk about. Like, I just don't. I let's talk about anything but NFTs. I'm not saying get off the phone. I just don't want to talk about NFTs, and dude would not leave it alone. That's why I'm like, that's a weird way to treat. This gets back to that transactional friendship thing, because it's like if somebody's like, hey, I don't want to talk about this, but somebody's continuing to force feed a conversation, that's not a friendship. And that's what I'm like,
that's
dude,
just antagonizing somebody.
Yeah, I mean, or using me as like his sounding board, and he's like just getting ideas out on like so I can hear them. And I'm like, I already expressed that I don't want to have this conversation. So him continuing to do that is like, oh, you don't actually respect me as a person, let alone a friend. So block, you know.
I think a lot of it is like, and I've noticed this because people love to talk when they invest in NFTs and things of that. It's like the technological equivalent of like bros talking about PX90. Like it's just like people want you to know everything about it. Like it's like,
the scary part about NFTs and crypto and blockchain is the vast majority of the people that have talked to me about it, not Chris, because Chris and we've devoted several hours, hundreds, maybe 100 hours actually over the course of our entire show to crypto and blockchain technology. But the vast majority of people that I meet cannot explain what the ledger is or how that works. Most people can't describe how a token is created or the necessity of mining. They just understand it as some variation of gambling, because it looks like day trading on the stock market, but really it's way more volatile than the stock market. It's just one of those things. Like I don't really pay attention when there are casual dialogues about, oh yeah, Doge or Shiba Inu or Ethereum, because that stuff's great. But most people don't actually understand the technology. They're just gambling.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It is gambling. I mean, and I'm one of those people. I don't truly understand the technology itself. I mean, I don't understand why I want to invest in something that had a dog on it on a digital Bitcoin. I was reading something about that the other day about somebody made a Bitcoin, or not Bitcoin, but NFT, something of that nature with a dog on it. And it was like selling out. It was like, or it raised in price. I'm just like, what is going on here? Like, I think it's just gotten too ridiculous. But again, I don't know if it's ridiculous because I don't know enough about it. I was a financial advisor for years. I understand stocks. I understand other financial instruments. I really do not understand Bitcoin. And what you said to me last night, a lot of people also don't understand commodities. And I understand commodities somewhat. And it reminds me more of commodity, more of NFTs than they do, some financial industry that I would that I feel confident in either investing in or talking about intelligently.
I mean, if it floods in Malaysia and it decimates their rice crop and it knocks out production of a semiconductor, the entire world feels it. But if there's a power outage in San Jose and the server that's hosting an NFT goes out, nobody fucking knows.
All these guys living in basements, hoping for that to hit awful.
Those guys aren't running nodes. They're not. No. They're not mirroring whichever blockchain that they purport to be really invested in.
Besides GameStop.
But that's a stock.
I know. I was just saying. No, you're right. You guys are right. I was just, I was saying it just, yeah, I just, again, I don't understand it that well. So the fact that you guys do, I would love to hear more about it.
Well,
Just
Chris actually has published a book about Bitcoin. It's available on Amazon.
Really?
Yeah, it's called "Is Bitcoin Bullshit," and I highly recommend it.
I like that. Could you send me the link?
I absolutely will send you a link.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for the plug.
Yeah, man, of course.
Shameless plug to you.
Hey, you know, it's part of the Rando Book Club. You know, people got to know what we got out there.
I mean, I just like reread it, or not the whole thing, but a lot of it, and it's just it's funny how you know, because I started writing it in 2014 and it published it in 2019, and that's where the way I wrote it was like obviously meant to hold up, but when you write something like that, you don't know exactly how well it holds up. But then, like a couple of years later, it's like, man, people should just fucking listen to me. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, yeah,
God
man.
damn it.
I'm saying
You just need to fucking listen to me. Fuck.
that book right there will break it down. It'll into a digestible and, you know, fairly easy to absorb string of characters. And it will make it make sense in a lot of ways. And
Well,
Let me ask you this, Chris, then. Is like, because I was, one of my friends, again, because they love to talk about it, was telling me how she owned Bitcoins. And they're like, really, like there's one of them is expensive. You know, they're extremely expensive now, or at least, quote unquote, they're very valuable now. Do you believe is your book talking about, is there going to be a crash, or is just the silliness of it, or a combination? Like, what do you think is going to happen?
let me ask you something. How many countries outside of the United States have you ever been to?
I've been to Germany, Slovakia, Austria, Hungary, and Mexico, and the Dominican Republic.
Okay, so how many different currencies have you ever used?
Well, the majority of the time I went there, I was like 13 because, but I did get different currency for when I was staying in Germany. But a lot of times they would still take the dollar because when I went there, it was on the cruise.
So you never really got into like exchanging dollars. So
No.
that's like my book, especially would be good for somebody like that in the sense of like what you have not missed out on.
Which months of the year?
Yeah.
Like okay, when you understand how trading works, there's no possibility of ever missing out on anything. But the issue is when people look at a new trend or a new fad and a new thing on which someone is like invested and then pushing a narrative that everyone else can make money, they're arbitraging, or they're trying to arbitrage, but don't even know what that word is. So it's like you can arbitrage anything, and you don't, as long as you know what you're doing, you just can't lose arbitraging effectively. And this is where it's like, that's not even what I'm talking about, but the book itself tries to break down principles of value so that people understand that value is constantly in flux. Your dollar's never static. No dollar's ever static. And in fact, what state are you living in?
Right now I'm in Indiana.
Okay, so you're in Indiana as well. So do you work locally? Like,
No, actually, I live in Vegas. I'm moving back on Thursday. That's where I work.
Your job pays you on Vegas scale. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So when you get paid on Vegas scale and live in Indiana, you are actually getting paid more than someone who lives in Indiana who does the same thing.
That's true.
Because your dollar is coming from a different region's pay scale. It's the same dollar, but it's not the same dollar. And this is like the US dollar is not actually fungible if you move outside of a region. And it's a lot easier to tell this when you go outside the country, but even within the country, you can already see this happening because you make money from one region and live in another. So you know why you live in Indiana, because your dollar goes farther here. That's the same reason I live here. My company I work for is not here either. But because everything's cheaper here, when I get paid, my dollar is actually worth more here than if I lived in Vegas. So it's those types of principles that a lot of Americans don't even understand about their own dollar that they need to be able to grasp before they can even begin to wade into the conversation is Bitcoin bullshit. Because a lot of Americans don't even know that their dollar is not backed by gold anymore. Like,
That's so true.
yeah, you know, there's too many Americans that still think the dollar is backed by gold, or they think it's like backed by oil. They think, oh, it's a petrodollar. Kind of. That's kind of true in a roundabout way.
Well, oil is valued
But
in
a
USD.
fiat currency, like a lot of Americans don't understand even what a fiat currency is. So that's kind of where I'm like addressing some philosophical gaps rather than like, I don't think anybody has any business doing arbitrage, especially on Bitcoin for their first time. Like, if you're not good at arbitrage, you have no business doing it effectively. And the main reason being, whales are always going to shake you out. And this is like, I've been the whale, I've been the bait, and I understand. It's like when you are a small fucking krill in that ocean and you're like, oh, I'm going to make some money. There's fucking whales out there that see your every goddamn move and are just manipulating, as Tian was talking about, the social engineering. They're manipulating your FOMO in ways you cannot possibly even fathom. The ways that FOMO is created, woo! If I got into it, people would think I was like making a science fiction novel, like the shit I've seen myself. So like the FOMO factories that go along with these things make it near impossible for someone to actually, like, nobody's going to read a book and start making money off of Bitcoin. That's just not going to, but my book is more like, not, again, it's giving people a bigger picture understanding of everything. Not saying don't like invest in anything, but it's like, I called out Theranos in 2019, bro. My shit is like in print. I'm calling out Theranos in 2019 before anybody else. You know what I'm saying? So this is where I'm like, people just should have fucking listened to me then. Like, who else is calling out Theranos in 2019? Nobody.
Well, now she's saying that her ex-boyfriend was using the systems or some shit.
Yeah.
Wasn't that that's the latest spin?
So like I guess like to answer your question, no, it's not about arbitrage. I'm trying to pull the veil off of bullshit, and I can point to that Theranos line forever. You know what I mean? That shit is published. I called out Theranos. Theranos is on trial for fraud in 2021, 2 years after I called it out. So this is where I'm saying this is way bigger. Is Bitcoin bullshit? Well, you need to understand the history of decentralization all the way back in China before you can even understand the true scale of that question. So that's where I'm like, the book is the question is about Bitcoin at the title of the book, but it's way bigger than that.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, Chris, because you obviously understand arbitrage, you understand Bitcoins. I mean, you wrote a book about it. Could you be a whale in this market? And I mean, does it make you think, hey, I can manipulate it enough to make money off of it, or you just think it's just not worth it at all?
You don't need to manipulate the market. You just need to manipulate people, and that's
What I mean. I meant that. I'm sorry. I meant that. Manipulate people.
Anybody can do that. You don't have to be smart to do that, bro. You don't have to be. Anybody can do that. That's the problem. Anybody can do that. You just have to find people who are dumb enough to fall for it. That's all. It does not. This is the inherent problem with this system. You don't have to be smart to make money or become wealthy. Have you heard about the one fucking real estate property in what is it? I think Bel Air.
It's
called The One.
Was it was the one for the Fresh Prince or
No.
No,
It's
no.
The building itself is referred to as the One.
Yeah,
Oh, no, I've not heard about
The One. So this guy, long story short, this real estate developer builds this $100 million property with the intention of turning into a $500 million property, basically stringing along the investors saying, oh yeah, everything's fine. We got all the shit is in line. And everything is working out fine. Well, it's all bullshit. So turns out this guy is like using every step of his public, every time the media would like run a story about this, he was basically planning these stories to make his investors feel safe about continuing to invest in this property. Well, this type of shit happens in everything, but his real estate scam is just one of the easiest ones to point at because it's like he was so what's the word? Up his own ass and thinking he was going to get away with it, that he's basically documenting every step of the way. And then when the shit like fucking
hit the fan?
like I can't think of the word right now, but they couldn't pay the loan. They defaulted on their loan, and
okay.
fucking the property gets seized, and all his investors are fucked. And this dude's basically scot-free because of the way that he like used the system that we have in place that protects people who bilk investors as long as they do it legally.
Oh yeah, like
So
a
this
corporate
is like-
liability.
Yes, exactly. So as long as you say the magic words and don't say the wrong magic words, you can do this shit and scam people and lie to them about progress and lie to them about the potential profits and return on interest or return on investment and still not go to prison. But then you have like Dan Bilzerian, who might end up going to prison because he did it in a different way with his CBD company. And the reason he might go to prison is because his dad was actually like a big fraudster. And because of the conditions of his prison sentence, his dad was not allowed to be the head of any organization. Well, it turns out he was like giving business advice to Dan because Dan took his like, this is like a huge deal. Dan Bilzerian took his dad's laundered money and started a company with that. So then the dad was trying to like lead the company from prison, which he was not legally allowed to do. But then Dan went rogue and started fucking burning through the money and in an attempt to make it look like he wasn't working for his dad anymore. So this shit is still playing out. So you have a lot of these types of like laundered, stolen funds using the appearance of legitimate businesses that are only skirting by because there aren't enough smart people to call them out. And that's exactly how Theranos was able to do that shit for fucking 9 years.
So he walked away with, well, no, the guy who did the one in Bel Air, he walked away rich, essentially, taking people's money, and everybody else essentially lost.
No, it's not that he walked away rich. It's that he didn't go to prison. He should have gone to prison.
Yeah.
He's not rich anymore. He's basically broke now compared to what he was. But he should have gone to prison for what he did.
Well, he was a high stakes poker player and an actor of some sort, some kind of. I think he was in some movies, like a stuntman or something like that.
That's so interesting.
Are you talking about Dan Bilzerian now?
Yeah.
No, okay, so that's even a lie. So Dan Bilzerian was like, he did not make his money playing poker. He just used that as a front to cover up the fact that he was like
interesting.
All his money was like given to him by his dad, who laundered it and used his son to hide the laundered money. So then Dan was saying he was a high stakes poker player and that's how he won it, but he didn't. So that's like there's even
worse.
Yes, dude. That's what I'm saying. That's Dan Bilzerian. And then the guy who was like the property engineer for the one, he was like a real estate engineer. So he had built all these homes before, and then he was saying, "Oh, this is good." That's why it's called the one, because he's like, "This is gonna be my pièce de résistance, and this is gonna be my, big final piece that's gonna be the biggest one." And that's how he was selling it to investors, because he had a reputation as being, the mansion designer or whatever like types of buildings he was designing at the time. So he used that to lie about the potential for this becoming a $500 million property. And then I think they ended up having to sell it or list it for like 80 million or something. So they invested 100 million. And because they defaulted on the loan, they had to sell it for like a 20 million loss, or maybe it's even more than that. But so they sold the property at a loss, and it wasn't even fucking finished when they sold it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
be legal, Jesus. I mean, I understand the magic word concept, but
exactly, and that's where it's like it's only legal because he did it with the proper legal entities protecting, and him like saying, like the way that they're framing it is if the people did not directly have influence over the investors' losses, and it was like related to market losses, that they can't be held directly liable for causing the losses. So these are the things that are happening where you're like, Elizabeth Holmes may yet get off, but because she's going there, because there's medical equipment involved, she might get off for the financial fraud, but then go to prison for medical equipment fraud, and might win one case and lose another. And that's where it's different with her, because there was medical equipment involved and people's lives were actually at stake. But whereas like when it's like a building and, there's no healthcare layer or anything like that, it's like a lot easier for then the person to then be held. He probably got held civilly liable and lost. That's how he lost his fortune, but he's not going to prison, which he probably should have gone to prison.
I just looked up Elizabeth Holmes. They rated her, Fortune 500 rated her as one of the world's most disappointing leaders. Like, that's an understatement.
Oh man.
Oh man, that's funny. No. Well, hey, that was amazing. Thank you for that tutorial. That was very interesting.
And that's all in a roundabout way to say it's like whales can manipulate markets using information in the same way. Every time fucking Elon tweets about Doge or Sheeb or whatever, it like moves the market. So you don't even have to actually put money in to move the market. He can, or when Jamie Dimon is like talking shit about Bitcoin, it like moves it in a different direction. Like, people don't have to actually, as whales, you don't even have to actually put money in a market to move it. It's really easy for markets to be moved by speculative markets. Well,
since you seem to know a lot about this, I have a question about that. This made me think about that. When I think about Bitcoins or NFTs, in general, I always think of just individuals buying these up. Do you think they're the banks are buying them up as well? Like, I mean, do you have any knowledge of that, or?
Ripple XRP is the backbone for American Express globally.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's definitely big banks buying up
huge
NFTs,
institutional and academic money in there.
Yeah, and that's why it's also like simultaneously not going to be some sort of liberating tool for poor people because of that very factor. This becomes like the self-defeating aspect. Sorry, just a second.
Here at Rockwell Automation's world headquarters, research has been proceeding to develop a line of automation products that establishes new standards for quality, technological leadership, and operating excellence. With customer success as our...
And we're back.
It becomes difficult to sort of... How the centralized markets work, it makes it like impossible for smaller people to emerge as like equal players when the big players have already taken their positions. And that's kind of why it's like disingenuous to frame any of these tools as sort of liberators of the working class or anything like that. But that's how they keep being framed, as if like, oh yeah, you just buy some Bitcoin and then you'll be rich one day, as if rich people aren't going to have a proportional stake that's going to outweigh your small stake. And I think it just like, especially Americans who have a dollar that's starting to hyperinflate. Americans, like, I'm not a nationalist at all, but when Americans buy Bitcoin, they're betting against their dollar. So it's not very smart.
I never thought about that. Yeah,
I don't really care about the dollar, so that's where I'm like, I'll get into Chainlink, I'll get into Bitcoin, I'll get into Badger, like I'll get into anything but U.S. dollars. But if you're like nationalist, buying Bitcoin is betting against the dollar, basically. So that's where I find it hilarious when there's these government initiatives to give people Bitcoin and like take the treasury and start buying Bitcoin. I'm like, wow, the government's betting against the dollar now. That's real bad. And maybe they just don't realize it, or maybe they do realize it. I don't know. But anytime, would
that be a good metric to use when government starts using Bitcoin? You know, they're pretty much giving up on, or something's about to go bad with the dollar. Or
yeah, because that's basically like giving up sovereignty over your currency.
Yeah,
and that's where I'm like, yeah. Anytime it happened in, what was it, Venezuela or Ecuador? I forget.
Venezuela.
Yeah. But yeah, they took on Bitcoin as legal tender. So that's where, yeah, it's a terrible sign for your local government's currency if they're starting to get into Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Which a lot of American governments are. So again, dollars hyperinflating. And I think what ends up happening is people look to try to find things to preserve value. And the easiest way to do that is to look what other people are doing, which is how speculation works, which becomes a problem because it's like every time somebody's looking over someone else's shoulder, you're not actually looking at the homework or doing the homework for that matter. So that's where it's like a bunch of, like, at any point in the line, this is where the whales will inject false information. So when you're looking over somebody else's shoulder, oh, what are you investing in? The whales have planted that thing to make you think, oh, they're about to pump Shibe. They're about to pump the Shibe coin this week. It's coming at on Tuesday at 5:32 p.m. Eastern exactly. So make sure you have all your tokens. And then that fucking pump never comes because that information was the fucking whales just offloading their bags onto people looking for tips. So it's like, man, because I got into currency trading before, like years before Bitcoin even existed. So when you trade stuff and then you start to see people jump into Bitcoin as like their first foray into trading.
Oy.
It's like, man, these people about to get eaten up. I don't care how much you put in, it's gonna be gone shortly.
Their 0.00016 bitcoins isn't really that much,
Right?
like
but
in the grand scheme of the pool.
Yeah, no. And the problem is that promise of, it's like, I know exactly what the promise is because it's like a symptom of this specific transactional culture. It's like people want a high payout transaction that can get them a buy-in with an extremely disproportionate payout so that they don't have to keep doing smaller transactions to make money. That's what everybody's trying to get into Bitcoin for the most part. And that's not who my book was written for, because is that person, like, there's nothing wrong with that person, but that is a very short-sighted way to approach capital. And it's hard to break that person out of that cycle. So my approach was like trying to write more towards the mind of people who see this thing and they like don't know like what to think about it. Like they're like, is this the future? I don't really know, because people have said that shit before. That's kind of who this book is written for, not somebody who's looking to make money off of Bitcoin. Because I think the person who's like, and especially the person who's never made money off of anything before, like the person who has never traded, never done arbitrage in their 30th or 40th year of life, trying to jump into Bitcoin, those people are dangerous. And that's where I'm like, I definitely am not trying to cater toward that person. No,
I did something similar as far as like small. I was thinking about when I was 29 getting into day trading. And again, thinking that I had some sort of knowledge, but didn't, I mean, it's not knowing that business as well. Like I just thought, hey, I'll figure it out. I'll be all right. That doesn't help the fact that I day drink during the time the market's open, so that didn't help. But also just not knowing it. And I think, that's, you're right. It's very dangerous without having a solid knowledge. I just thought I could buy day trading for dummies and, be all right. And I still have that book actually. But no, you're right. I think without that solid knowledge, like getting into it when you're that old and without any sort of backgrounds, is dangerous. So I agree.
And, I'm in a very lucky, fortunate situation in that when I was in high school, our computer teacher made all the classes like register Forex, like demo accounts.
Yeah.
Because then it's like you can trade without any sort of consequence. So they had us doing that shit when we were 14 and 15 on fake accounts before, ever even getting remotely close to actually trading currency or anything like that.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So that's where I'm like, I was very fortunate from that respect, but I don't discourage people from trying new things, but people don't truly grasp how dangerous it is until they've lost a bunch. And that's where it's like
that kid who killed himself.
But the problem becomes you can lose a bunch without actually learning anything. Whereas if you learn before you lose, at least you then learned. And that's kind of the problem with like, people think that, I can just go if I put 10K in Bitcoin, whatever, I'll learn a lesson. No, you don't actually learn a lesson if you don't learn anything about it. Like, that's not how that works. You don't absorb knowledge by losing money. That's like,
I think some people have some kind of poor faith assessment in the academic process, and they think that it's just analogous to throwing money into the wind.
Yeah,
I think that there are people out there who think that that's all it takes to gain some knowledge, and so if they can just give it to a machine, maybe they're maybe I'm making a really big leap in.
No, I think you're right in that reductive approach to knowledge, in that they also then don't respect degrees because, oh, you just paid for that doctorate or whatever, and don't understand the actual work that goes into a dissertation.
During peak academic season, how many words a week do you have to write?
Oh God.
I'm just gonna throw out a number and you can tell me if I'm high or low. 10,000.
That's probably a little high during peak, but it's not far off.
Okay. That's a lot of words.
It's not far off.
That's actually
where
a lot
I'm
of
like-
words.
Yeah, it's like in, depending on what is happening, it's like there may be discussions happening in which you're like doing it in text or doing assignments or doing work on your dissertation, and then it's like one thing may be 1,000 words right there. Just like 600 words is like fucking nothing, man. You can barely say some shit in 600 words. Like,
Yeah, I think it's like the average for word count per page, 10,000 words yields 20 pages of single-spaced text.
Yeah.
I think most a lot of the papers that I've written just for associate degree level program, it's the most that I've had to write was 7 pages. So, and the majority of the assignments are double spaced assignments, and so it doesn't even seem like a lot. It doesn't seem like a lot of words. You get a lot of pages, but it's not as dense as, well, real academic papers end up becoming very dense reads.
Yeah, because there's no flourish writing. It's all, everything that's written is relative to the study or the piece.
Yeah. I also think that there's a disparity in understanding of what academic writing really is. I don't think that people realize that the written English language in an academic environment is very different from colloquial English as we speak it on the ground and in the way that people write. Most
or
people
what
don't
it takes to get published academically. People think you can just write stuff and get published. Like,
you got to go through a review process.
I mean, it has
You
to be
editors,
accepted.
You got to get it.
And this is where you have to do something that is actually going to be accepted as useful, a useful addition to your academic space before it even considers to get published. And that's where, like, let alone the peer review process. So that's where you see people like Graham Hancock. I'm going to specifically pick on him because he tries to oversimplify the academic process. He avoids peer review because his ideas don't stand up to peer review. That's why he goes and writes fiction books and then frames it as if academia can't handle his ideas. Like, no, his shit just doesn't hold up to peer review. That's all.
Wait,
so then,
does Battlefield Earth stand up to peer review?
Oh man.
Wait, hey, Chris, I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
A sidebar. I'm assuming that you're going for your doctorate, or you already have one. Is that?
Yeah, I'm 80% done, and I'm like I hit a wall mentally just because it's like it's a lot. It's a fucking lot.
No, I thought about going for my doctorate in American history, but again, I just, like you said, it would be a lot. But on your question for when you write your dissertation, and you're going through peer reviews, like how many rewrites did you or how many peer reviews did you go through where they said this isn't ready yet, or you had? Again, I'm not 100% familiar with the process, but I'm sure that you had to get a few peer reviews to read it, and or even if you haven't written it yet. I don't even know if you've even written.
My fourth.
Yeah. So, like, how many rewrites do you go through on a typical dissertation before it's actually available?
I mean, I don't know if there's a typical number, but I know there's gonna be at least like nobody's gonna do it without 3 rewrites. Nobody's gonna do it without 3 rewrites, at least.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Nobody. And it's probably gonna be more like 5 or 6.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
And that's what I was wondering, because I knew that, like, you want to get that feedback to, but I just didn't know how many times you actually do typically. So
I think it would be disingenuous for the academic process to, fast track an individual's dissertation just for whatever arbitrary reasons, when there's a standing history of, they've got to meet, not just meet requirements, but demonstrate mastery of the subject beyond what is expected. My understanding of people that are doing doctoral work and postdoctoral work is they're working on the future, essentially.
Well, yeah, and even to that note, when you're writing it, if you're doing an experiment in your research, when you're writing your dissertation, it has to be in future tense. Once your experiment's done, you have to go rewrite it in fucking past tense. So I'm not like, I already know I'm gonna have to do another fucking rewrite. You know what I'm saying? That's just to put it into past. So that's where it's like shit like that, where people have no idea the depth of the fucking process, and they're trying to make commentary. Like Joe Rogan will make commentary about academia, and this motherfucker didn't even finish his undergrad, let alone know anything about graduate school, or like the master's program is so vastly different than the doctoral program. Because like, man, the doctoral program, like I train in Muay Thai, and I've trained in Tai Chi, I've trained in like wrestling, I've trained in like some very hard martial arts. Not that Tai Chi is one, but I've trained in soft and hard martial arts.
Chris is one of the most disciplined people I know.
I was going to say,
a doctorate is
like a ninja.
A doctorate will beat anybody into submission. It will beat the world's strongest person into submission, and that's just what it does. Nobody is going like. Everybody gets broken by a doctorate. It breaks you in probably a similar way as like, I can only imagine Navy SEAL training is only the even remotely closest thing that is like probably as mentally exhausting. It's like, a marathon will have you run like 35 marathons all in a row. That's what it feels like doing a doctorate. It feels, and the closer I get to the end, it's like the more I question even why I'm doing it, but that's why the people who make it to the end are truly meant to do it. So it's like, if you're going to do a doctorate, you really have to have a legitimate good reason, or you're not going to fucking finish. It's going to break you.
Well, I like the Navy SEAL because especially when you said towards the end, that's when you want to quit the most, and unless you really want to do it. And that's exactly what the Navy SEAL program is designed to do. It wants to break you every step of the way. It wants to break you. They want to make you know that you want to do it. That was a great analogy. Thank you.
I mean, that's what it feels like. Again, that's the only thing I've never done the Navy SEAL training or test or anything, but like I said, having trained in Muay Thai and wrestling, there's nothing even remotely close training those things that get close, like to what.
So speaking of Navy SEALs, Dan Bilzerian apparently was in SEAL training but failed to matriculate.
Yeah, which
no surprise.
Yeah, because then he basically lied and said, "Oh, I did the thing with broken legs to try to make himself look cool." It's like, dude, they would not let you do that shit.
Yeah.
I was in the Army National Guard, and the idea of doing Navy, I wouldn't even wear a Navy SEAL shirt. Like I am not ready to do that kind of training. Like
I knew a person who was accepted into SEAL training, and he broke his leg, and then the next thing he knew, he was an IT guy in Virginia.
Really?
Yeah.
In Quantico?
He was, not a Navy SEAL candidate anymore because he broke his leg.
Oh, okay.
And ended it for him.
Oh yeah.
That's the end.
Navy SEALs and astronauts are like the pinnacle of physical and mental performance. Like the combination. Like there's no sport or anything else that probably compares to the needs of what it takes to be an astronaut or a Navy SEAL.
I think there are a few other groups that might qualify, but those are the two prominent ones that we can identify.
Yeah. If we like really thought about it,
I'm sure there's like
somebody who's like working on submarines while they're fucking moving or some shit. You know what I mean? Like
I think
I would say the Secret Service as well.
Oh yeah, them too. They
think
definitely
like Air Force Pararescue. I bet there's like a few guys who do like in the Coast Guard who are of that caliber.
But I bet they cross over too.
Yeah,
I bet
they do.
Everything that you're about to name, I bet they cross over.
Yeah.
And a lot of those people are either
candidates for astronaut training or for whatever reason, like they come from a Coast Guard family, so they stay in the Coast Guard instead of going into Air Force or applying for NASA.
Yeah, I'll give you guys a fun fact. And again, I haven't searched this for about a year, so maybe it's changed since then. But the Secret Service is the only branch of government that's never been infiltrated by a foreign entity. Not like the CIA, FBI. Secret Service is the only one that has not, at least been confirmed.
Well, I mean, there's been a legal distributed denial of service attack being perpetrated on the IRS for the last like several years.
Yeah.
So and that's that. I can't remember the name of the company, but they're holding places on the phone switchboard. So that's why.
Yeah, but the Secret Service is no longer part of the Treasury. They moved
it's not. When did they do that?
No. They moved it when they reorganized the Homeland Security Department.
Huh.
Like I don't know if they still handle Treasury issues. They might. I'm not 100% sure about that. That's something we might want to look up. But they actually moved. I want to say I'm 99% sure about this, but I knew they were originally part of the Treasury. I know that, but I think they realigned them.
Well, that explains why the IRS is under fucking continuous DDoS attack.
Yeah, I'm gonna look that because I am pretty sure they moved them to.
Yeah, no, they moved them 11 days after 9/11. It was right when they created DHS.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. I thought so. Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, because I don't think they handle Treasury shit anymore or stuff anymore. Sorry, guys.
Oh, you can. We self-produce. We don't care about F-bombs and shit or the litany of curse words that offend a very small subset of people. We don't.
Just so you know,
there's a 3-letter F word that we won't say because that one actually hurts people. But fuck, fuckity, fuck. I don't give a fuck.
Well, just so you know, if I join this again between 2 and 4 on a Sunday, there's a good chance I'm drinking. So I lose my filter, like maybe like towards the end. So
even better.
Guys, this has been so much fun. I really appreciate you guys allowing me to.
Thanks for joining, man.
Yeah.
I was just telling my friend Julie, who Tien knows, is that like I always thought I was an intelligent person, but like I'm on like level 2, and you guys are like at 12. You guys are amazing. It's been a lot of fun. I'm just glad I was able to hang in with you guys as much as I did. So,
yeah, well, the trick is to ask questions and to ask more questions and just to keep asking questions. That's how we gain understanding of things. That's how we keep from being ignorant. And so, I think that's what we really try to encourage is long form dialogue and asking questions.
No, I always tell people, I mean, and I agree with that 100%, is that I always want to hang out. I don't want to be the smartest person in a room. I want to ask questions of people who, and again, everybody has their a sort of bailiwick of their own.
I'm just going to say I don't mind being the smartest person in the room because I like solitude and I like being alone.
Well, and honestly, like the way Tien explained it, I thought you were going to be basically talking most of the time because you're an expert in poli-sci stuff. And that's where I'm like, I was prepared to like listen to you, man.
Oh, you know what? Hey, next week we can do a poli sci. I'll be there. I'll talk to you.
That's good.
No, we did. We actually had a good conversation. I was telling Julie this. We talked everything about George Bush to Jacob's Ladder's penis rings. So it was a lot of fun. Like we had like this. No, we're not. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I actually felt like Tia and I actually had like a mini podcast last night. He and I were just the banter that we had was a lot of fun.
Well, yeah, man, that's what we do at Exceptional Randos. We dissect the conversation and we take it apart. We put it back together, and sometimes it turns into something really cool. Most of the time, it turns out to be really cool. It just takes a while to get into it sometimes, and sometimes you have to listen to the whole thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, this has been fun. I mean, we talked about everything today. And again, and again, he did explain that's exactly what you guys do. You guys start off on it and you go on tangents and different things. And I love that. It's almost like you're sitting at a bar and you just talk, you start at one thing and then you just go on, different things because everybody has a little bit different knowledge of something, and so they input that into the conversation.
Except it's better than a bar because we don't have to yell at each other to hear each other.
That's true, and my beer is cheaper.
Yeah, there you go. Don't have to listen to that other conversation across the way.
Exactly. So if you guys ever want me back, I would be welcome to come back.
Definitely, man.
Yeah,
this has been fun. And yeah, let's have a poli sci conversation next week, and that way I can show my mom that I'm not just, sitting on my ass doing nothing.
All right, man. Thank you so much for joining
guys.
us.
Thanks a lot, man. Thanks for
It was a pleasure. Julie, want to say bye?
Bye, guys.
See ya.
Bye, guys.
Later. So we've got a few minutes left. I just wanted to touch on the horrific tragedy that was that happened on the film set of Rust. It's unfortunate when anyone perishes, especially while performing their job in a place where they don't expect to get shot. But it looks like there's some light at the end of the tunnel. There's been quite a big push from the film industry to ban guns and start using computers to generate the imagery associated with things that go boom, as they should. So maybe we're on the verge of a whole new world of entertainment that relies on brain power instead of I don't know I don't have a good one for that. Grain power, gunpowder.
Exceptional Radio.
Exceptional Randos Show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.
Here at Rockwell